I hope, is the air conditioner on, or is it? Welcome to this first of a series of classes for Episcopal 101. Now, I've written out a little thingy today, but this is really a free-floating, free-forming class. It's here to answer questions that you want to have. I want to sort of focus in my little mind on what we do on Sundays, what we do as a church, how we operate as a church is another weekend, and how we think and our theology, how the denomination works is another. But that's just a little format for me. It doesn't have to be that way. We'll answer questions as they arise. And this is a class where if we want to go down a rabbit hole, we'll go down a rabbit hole and stay there. But I just want to start with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you. Fill us, Christ, this day with joy and power and peace. May your love lift us and strengthen us always. Amen. Amen. Bella, you're late. I was going to have you hand out stuff.
Dave, do you want any handouts?
Yes.
I'm up here because all the other seats were.
I'm going to start off following the agenda, and then we'll go whichever way we want to go.
Oh, he's going to sit down.
So,
It's really easy to sit with us.
what are we doing in church on Sunday mornings and why? Now, the genesis of this question is that, where'd Bobby go?
Right here.
Bobby has come from the Catholic Church, and she's said to me on several occasions, well, you know, this is just like the Catholic Church, except you do this and we don't do that. In other words, there's a lot of overlap. It's very familiar, but it's different. But I noticed that you don't do things like you have the little set of candles at the end near the emergency exit and the door there. But we don't have prayers for the saints and the invocation of the Virgin Mary. What's the difference between the Episcopalians and Catholics on the Virgin Mary and the saints and all that sort of stuff? And we'll answer those questions, but I wanted to sort of get to how we get there to lay a bit of a foundation. And then we have people from what I would call non-liturgical background, people who are Baptists or people who had never been to church before, and this is their first experience. And they want to know, what's the deal with the outfits? Why, if a suit and tie were good enough for Billy Graham, why do you dress like a character in a novel or something? Well, that's another, another question. And so this is what I want to start out with. What are we doing on Sunday mornings and why? Now, the Episcopal Church is a church of the book. Two books, really. The first book's the Bible. The second book is the Book of Common Prayer. The Bible is from where we draw our faith. It's the menu to the meal which is our salvation in Jesus Christ. The Book of Common Prayer, they're the instruction manual that came with your erector set or your bicycle that you're putting together. It's how we do these things. It's not why. Why is in the Bible. But how we do that is in this Book of Common Prayer. And the Book of Common Prayer basically has rites or services or usages that are divided by the year. We have daily services, things we do every day. We're supposed to do every day, morning and evening prayer. Then we have weekly things like Eucharist. Then we have things that happen maybe once a year. Easter. We have Easter and Good Friday services. Then we have things that maybe happen once in a lifetime. Baptism, marriage, ordination, last rites. Then we have things that may never happen. Thanksgiving for the birth of a woman. It's called the church. Thanksgiving for the birth of a woman. Thanksgiving following the birth for a woman. In other words, last week we did an informal Thanksgiving for Sandy safely delivering her 2 baby boys. That's a service in the Book of Common Prayer. I just shortened it. I didn't do the whole, I didn't want to add a half hour to the service, but in other words, we have things that are occasional. We have things that are weekly. We have things that are daily. Now, where did it all start? Well, it all started, of course, with the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church rhythms were driven by the monasteries. they had the offices or the Book of Hours. And in a monastery, you would have 5 services a day. Now, when the English Reformation came about, the Church of England, when it split, when Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church, he kept the Catholic Church, he just removed the Pope. So under Henry VIII, the Episcopal Church, or the Church of England, was the same as the Catholic Church in its liturgy, in its worship, but there was no Pope. Henry's son, Edward, was a Protestant, and so he took the church in this direction, dropping a lot of things. His next daughter, when Edward died, his daughter Mary, known as Bloody Mary, was a Catholic, and a cocktail waitress, I guess. Bloody Mary, well, that's a bad joke. And she took it back to the old way, and then the third child, Elizabeth, struck it down the middle. And ever since that time, the Anglican or the Episcopal world has an idea of itself as being a via media, the middle way between Protestantism and Catholicism. If you ask us, are we Protestants? Yes. Are we Catholics? Yes. We're both. But we're down the middle. Now, what is this word Anglican? Where did that come from? I mean, girls, when Laura and Claudia were little, they had a Catholic friend, and I was over at their mother's picking up one day, and Zizi's mother, what was her name?
Summer.
Summer. Summer wasn't the brightest, sharpest arrow in the quiver.
Angelican, right?
And she said, now, you're Angelicans, aren't you? Now, what does that mean? You worship angels? And she actually,
Anglicans.
I said, no, Anglican. Oh, I didn't want to go too deep into it, but what does Anglican mean? Where does it come from? Are we Anglicans? Yes, we're Anglicans. We're all Anglicans who worship in the ways that arose out of the Church of England. We could be American Anglicans, Japanese Anglicans, African Anglicans, we're all Anglicans. But our roots are drawn through England. Now, where does the word Anglican come from? Well, on the first page, it originates in the phrase Anglicana Ecclesia Libera Sit, a phrase from the Magna Carta dated from 1215, meaning the Anglican Church shall be free. Anglican is the Latin word for English. Now, just as you can be a Roman Catholic without being a Roman, you can be an Anglican without being English. In fact, the vast majority of Anglicans are not English. The majority of Anglicans these days are Africans. There are about 20 million Nigerian Anglicans in church this weekend. There may be there are 3 million Episcopalians. Any Sunday, 1 million will show up. But there are more Anglicans in Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi and places like that than there are in England and in the rest of the West. It's now primarily a third world in the sense of majority of its members are from the developing world. But here's the funny thing about, I'm going to harp on this because I love history. The phrase was deliberately taken from the Magna Carta. Does anybody remember that? Denise, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're English. Do you remember those misty days of the Magna Carta and King John and the Knights and the Island of Runnymede? Well, okay, I'll answer the question for you because I'm excited. King John, Prince John of Robin Hood fame, was not a nice king. He was a tyrant. He wanted to be a ruler. And the barons rebelled against him. And there was a settlement which was called the Magna Carta, the Charter, the Great Charter, the Charter of Rights. And it was signed in 1215 on the island of Runnymede in the Thames River. And in that, it laid out the inalienable rights of Englishmen, and it covered including the church. The Anglican Church, the church in England, shall be free. Free from whom? Well, free from foreign influences, be it the king, be it the Pope, be it anybody. And also it started and laid down the tradition that you as an individual Anglican are free. What does that mean? You are not a vassal of your priest. You understand what I mean by that? In other words, it's not like the only way you can be Christian is if you're in good with your local parish priest. You have, through your faith, direct relationship with Jesus Christ. This is 400 years before the Reformation. The English church was saying the church in England shall be free. It doesn't mean we're hippy-dippy Quakers, we do what we want when we want. We still have rules, and they're laid out in the Book of Common Prayer of what we do and when we do it and why we do it. Now, how did this unique, I call it British, this British Christian sensibility arise? Christianity came to the island of Britannia and Hibernia, which is Ireland too, so we can all sort of call it the same thing. Even though you can't call the English and the Irish the same, they get all upset about it. It came during the Roman Empire. And the first English martyr was St. Alban, who was a Roman soldier who was martyred for his Christian faith by his commanders in the year 205. St. Alban's Cathedral, which is a very nice suburb of London to the west, is the site of where he was martyred 1,800 years ago. And when we have accounts of the various councils in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, we read about British bishops coming from England to participate in these councils, and in Lyon and Nicaea and this and that and the other. Then we have the collapse of the Roman Empire and the Dark Ages, the Barbarian Invasions. One of the first places the Romans abandoned was the island of Britannia, because they couldn't defend it against the invading tribes. And Roman Christianity in the south, then as now, London was the center of all things. That Christianity was almost wiped out. What remained was the Celtic, or Celtic if you live in Ireland, Boston, the Celtic Christianity. And those Christians were pushed into Scotland, into Ireland, into Wales, into Devon, in the places that are not as expensive or nice as the suburbs of London. And the pagans sort of controlled the major nice parts, but in the woods, in the mountains, was this remnants of Celtic Christianity. This is the Christianity of the bishops who went to the various councils of St. Alban. And this Christianity became by necessity monk-driven. We didn't have any bishops. We had these monks living in the woods, and the monks would go from village to village, town to town, sort of secretly, not advertising their presence, keeping the Christian flame alive. Something very similar happened in Japan. In the 1500s, the Jesuits went to Japan and began to evangelize, and soon there was a church of about 20,000, 30,000 people in the southern island, Kyushu, or whatever the southern island is in Japan. Then one of the emperors outlawed Christianity, and Christians were martyred if they publicly professed their faith, and there were no foreigners were allowed in, and all this and that. And Christianity was officially wiped out in Japan. Well, after 1850, when Commodore Perry, the American naval officer, forcibly landed, the U.S. Navy moved into Tokyo, I think it was Tokyo Bay, and said to the Japanese emperor, "We're coming." And the emperor agreed to allow Westerners back in. Missionaries, of course, followed. And what did the missionaries find in the southern islands of Japan? A secret Catholic church that had existed for 400 years without priests, without bishops, without anybody. But in their villages, in their fishing huts, in their little times together, the Christian faith was kept alive. Most recently, we saw this in Angola. 1973, Portugal gave independence and started the civil wars that lasted 30 years. Parts of the country were controlled by the communist guerrillas. When the Civil War ended, about 2001, 2002, the missionaries went back in. What did they discover? Christianity had been thriving in these African villages, even though there were no Portuguese Catholic priests there. So this has happened again and again and again. Okay, in 596 or 8, the Pope Gregory sent St. Augustine to England to re-evangelize. He He landed in Canterbury and started the work of re-Christianizing England. Just as this point, they come into contact with the Celtic Christians. And we have two types of Christianity. Because for 200, 300 years, the Celtic Christians have been doing their own thing. Very fine without the Pope, thank you very much. We didn't need bishops. We had our monks, we had priests, we just, we knew you guys were there, but we were us, and that was you. And in 697, on the island of Whitby, which is off the northeast coast of England, just off the coast, there was a synod. How do we rejoin the Celtic Church and the Catholic Church? And we adopted the structure of the Catholic Church with the spirituality of the Celtic Church. It was a merger. So what English Christianity or British Christianity had from its very beginning was the prominence and essential nature that you're not a bunch of sheep if you're a member of a church. You think for yourself. You have faith for yourself. You're led and guarded and guided and educated by your priests. But if the bishops disappear for 300 years, that's not going to mess things up that much. The first Episcopal church was founded in Jamestown in, I think, 1620, something like that, 400 odd years ago. And there are Episcopalians or Anglicans or members of the Church of England in America for 200 plus years before the first bishop ever set foot in this country. The priests, people who wanted to be priests, had to go back to England to be ordained, but then they came back here, and this entire Episcopal world was done without bishops, even though it was the Episcopal Church, which means the Church of Bishops. So the DNA of our way of doing things has always been very independent, always been placed a premium on your own mind, your own heart. The hierarchy is important, just as this book is important, of what we do, when we do, and why we do. But at the end of the day, these are just manuals. It doesn't replace your own faith. So that was one rabbit hole that I went down. Now, how do we use this Book of Common Prayer on Sundays? Well, in the Book of Common Prayer, which I happen to have right here, and if you don't have one, if you walk away with one Sunday, we're not going to cry. People don't steal these. It's like Gideon Bibles and Howard Johnson hotels. They never get stolen. TVs, yes. Towels, yes. Bibles and prayer books, nobody ever steals. The table of contents, as I mentioned, lays out the different forms of services, weekly, daily, yearly, whenever. It also lists a calendar of saints' days. Now, I'll just do a little digression. Do we have saints in the Episcopal Church? Yes, we do. But we haven't added any saints since the Reformation in the sense of saints. We have people we commemorate. C.S. Lewis. He has a feast day that we honor him, but we don't call him Saint C.S. Lewis. The reason why is that the thinking is that a saint is a saint of the universal Church of God. St. Peter, Paul, whatever, St. Augustine. And for us, in our own particular slice, to declare this person to be a universal saint of God is a bit pushy. We honor them, we, hold days in their memory, but we're not going to take the step of calling them saints. You understand that thinking? So, theologically, there's no difference between, say, St. Augustine or St. Francis or St. Thomas Aquinas and C.S. Lewis, theologically. It's just that we don't call them Saint so-and-so. We call them C.S. Lewis. Yes, Susan?
Is it only the Catholic Church that creates the saints, and we have the saints because of the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church?
Well, the Catholic Church considers itself to be the universal church. So they consider that they have the right to make new saints. So last week they made 5 or 6 new saints, John Henry Newman being one of them, Cardinal Newman, the famous English Catholic convert. But they can do that because they think Catholic means universal. Well, of course we can do it. The Orthodox also make their own saints, modern saints. Nicholas and Alexandra, the last of the Romanov czars. They are saints in the Russian Orthodox Church, because the Orthodox consider themselves to be the true universal church. We also consider ourselves to be the true universal church, but we're not as pushy about it. I guess we're Episcopalians. We don't want to show off or whatever. I don't know. Now, what do we think of saints? In some forms of Catholicism, there is a great emphasis placed on the intercession of saints. That you pray, oh Saint Anthony, oh Saint Michael, or that you light a candle and ask the saint in heaven to pray for you to advance your cause with God. Do Anglicans or Episcopalians do that?
No.
Yes and no.
We got a good Episcopalian answer, right?
C.S. Lewis addressed this point, and C.S. Lewis was probably the greatest lay Episcopalian of the 20th century in terms of his writing, in terms of his teaching of the faith. This is somebody who I follow and I trust. C.S. Lewis said he was uncomfortable praying for the intercession of the saints because a human being is a creature. It's created by God. And thinking that one creature can advance the cause of another creature with the Creator is a fundamental misunderstanding of our relationships with the Creator. The Bible tells us again and again and again, you have one advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. So you don't need to go to St. Anthony or St. this or that. But we also believe in the communion of saints. That's Christians past, present, and future. Saints, like I've been mentioning, to my dead mother, who we can pray and ask them to intercede with us to join our prayers. But their prayers are no more efficacious, meaning that you don't get extra brownie points in heaven by having them help out. If it is something that in your spiritual life brings you strength and comfort and joy, do it. But you don't have to.
So it's similar to holding hands in a prayer group, communion with the saints, holding hands with other saints, not having them be your advocate, and praying to them so that they pray for you.
Some of you who are cradle Episcopalians may have, sometime in the 1950s, Father so-and-so moved from celebrating the Eucharist like that, with his back to you. He turned around and faced you. And 20-odd years later, Vatican II, the Catholics did the same thing. What's going on there? It was the notion that the priest is part of the congregation, not the funnel through which the congregation connects to God. There was no great theological debate or discussion, but just it was said, well, we need to basically stress this point even more clearly, and how we do things with our body shapes a lot of, for me, if I say to myself, yes, I can lie in my hammock and pray to God, in 5 minutes I'm asleep. But if I am in a body position where I'm actually praying, it sort of focuses. So the movement of the priest from facing the altar with his back to the congregation to facing the congregation was a change of the priest being the funnel mindset of we need Father because without Father it's not real, to the priest is part of the congregation, but if you will, the maitre d' or the major domo or the host or whatever. And in our Holy Communion service, Eucharist is the principal or the main service of the church. This is a change. When I was a little boy, I'm a cradle Episcopalian. When I was a little boy, we had Holy Communion one Sunday a month. There were other Episcopal churches. You go to places in Virginia where it was 4 times a year or twice a year. In the colonial church, the Church of George Washington, they only had it on Christmas and Easter. And what they had in its place was morning and evening prayer. Now, why did Holy Communion, Eucharist? Now, the Catholics have always made Holy Communion the center thing. Why in our Episcopal world did we change that? Well, here is, if you will, the genius or the weakness of the Anglican way. It's a man named John Wesley. He's a Methodist. Wesley was also a priest of the Church of England. And he began, as a young man after he was ordained, celebrating Holy Communion every day. And people, and his bishop thought, you are strange. This is weird. We do it once or twice. I mean, what are you, a Catholic or something? But for Wesley, it was partaking of the body and blood of Jesus Christ in fellowship with others that made the church the church. And here's a difference between us and the Roman Catholics. In seminary, Susan and I were in seminary together. You weren't a student, you had babies, but we did everything together. She's barefoot and pregnant.
You were in the kitchen though.
I was in the kitchen. We had a wonderful friend named Father Anthony, who was our age, Anthony Ruff. He was a Benedictine monk from St. John's Abbey in someplace in Minnesota. It was very, very cold, 10 months of the year. He was the Abbey organist, and he was going to Yale to get his doctorate in music from the Divinity School. But, you know, we all are sort of thrown together, and Susan and I were in our early 30s, and so we weren't really like the kids in their mid-20s, but we weren't like the second career type. So, you know, you sort of find people with the same. Father Anthony was our age. Father Anthony would get up every morning at 6 a.m., go to the basement of the Yale Divinity School, and one of the basement rooms had all these altars against the wall, and where a Catholic priest would celebrate a Mass by himself. He would celebrate the Mass by himself every morning. No congregation, no audience, nothing. I am forbidden by what the rubrics, which are the instructions, the stage directions, in this book to do that. When we were in England years later, I took as the assistant or the junior chaplain at this college, it was my job to do the early morning service. And there was no electricity in the chapel. And I would go out, and the chapel was built in the year 1266 and had not been modernized since then.
It was cold.
It was cold, and it was dark, but had great sound. And I would go out, and they still had me, and the chaplain was old-fashioned, so he wanted me to celebrate with my back to the congregation, using the church as it was designed. And I would start the opening sentences of the communion service of the Church of England, which is a little different.
Turn around, see if
But essentially would start out with, blessed be God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I'd listen. And if I didn't get an answer, I'd have to turn around and do morning prayer. Because there was no people, no communion. Why? Communion means we do it in common. It's not the possession of the priest. No congregation, no communion. So somebody, yes,
How many people? Just one other person could be there?
well, if you can wake up an altar boy, then you can do it.
I don't get that.
you weren't there.
No, I was asleep.
I think that's,
Under the quilt.
I think that's maybe a local deep rule.
That was Bishop Brewer.
Yeah, Bishop Brewer has a rule, you have to have 2 people.
Oh.
So an Okeechobee at 8 o'clock on Sundays in the winter, in the summer, no, it's all right. It's not gonna happen. But there are 3 communion services. Rite 1, which is longer, has more traditional languages, these and thous. And Rite 2, which is shorter. Within Rite 1, you can use Rite 1, or Rite 1, Rite 2. There are 2 options. Shepherd of the Hills, every year we flip. A, B, 1, 2, year after year. Then there's the Rite 2 Eucharist. And there are 4 options, A, B, C, and D. Shepherd of the Hills, every year we move to the same one. This is in December 1st, which is the first Sunday of Advent, we'll move from Rite B to Rite C. Rite C is, if you remember, is the Star Trek rite. The stars and their planets, you know. It was written in the 70s. All we need is William Shatner narrating. And go boldly where no one has gone before. To boldly go where no one has gone before. And then there's something called Rite 3. It's not in the book, but it says Rite 3 is a make your own Eucharist, but you can't use it unless you have permission of the bishop. The key center and pause and prayers and the healing service are Rite 3 Eucharists, meaning the bishop brewer has already approved these, and you can sort of change them as the service warrants, but the basic format, you need the Lord's Prayer, you need this, you need that, and all the other stuff, and that can be authorized for local usage. So if you ever go to some of these hippy-dippy Episcopal churches, I don't know, in Vermont someplace,
Big Pine.
Big Pine, where they're doing stuff, you're going, my God, where did this come from? That's Rite 3, the bishop gave us permission.
And the bishop gave.
Somebody had their, Rudy.
Well, isn't there one other, I mean, those of us that go out as lay Eucharistic visitors and are using a Eucharist, communion under special circumstances.
Yeah.
Isn't that another?
Yeah, that would be, yes it is, but it's not a Sunday service.
But it's also in the prayer book.
It's in the, that's in the prayer book.
We take it directly
But
from.
we, somebody asked the question, why can't the deacon, why don't we have a place where we keep the reserved sacrament so that the deacons can celebrate communion from pre-consecrated bread if I'm not here for some reason? The answer is, we have such a box. It's the box on the wall, on this wall, underneath the red candle, which is lit all the time. And that candle is lit to signify the presence of consecrated body and blood of Jesus Christ. At the service, we usually consecrate extra, and those are taken by the lay Eucharistic visitors, and we do the pastoral home Eucharists. Aaron Durix goes to the Key Center with 30-odd hosts and the wine consecrated by me, and does a Rite 3 Eucharist, but she's not celebrating. She is, in essence, is a lay Episcopal visitor using pre-consecrated hosts. Bishop Brewer will not, as a rule, allow a deacon to celebrate a deacon's mass unless there's special circumstances or whatnot. So I'm going away for 4 weeks, 4 weekends. The deacons are going to be preaching. They're already licensed to do that. But Bishop Brewer's flat rule, it's not even worth asking, is you have to have a priest there to celebrate Holy Communion.
But we will have the healing service because of the reserve sacrament.
Yes, and because it's a Rite 3, and so it sounds legalistic, but what's the church without being legalistic?
But it's not a deacon's mass.
It's not a deacon's mass. There are such things, but not around here. So that's how, and then there are within those, there are 3 types. Said, sung, and choral. A said Eucharist is the 8 o'clock, no music, and we just say the words. A sung Eucharist is no instruments, but I sing, and the congregation sings the responses. I go, at 5 o'clock on Saturday night, the Lord be with you. And the congregation says, and also with you, lift up your heart. And I sing, and the congregation sings with, well, Kathy Pennybacker and I basically have a duet. And when Father Les is there, he sings very loudly, but very badly. So Kathy has to sing ultra loud for the rest of the congregation to follow along. So, but that's a sung Eucharist. And then we have a choral Eucharist, where we have instruments and a choir. So they're the 3 types, said, sung, choral. And one is not better than the other. I like the sung Eucharist because I like to sing. I love choral Eucharist because I like choral Eucharist. I like to say the Eucharist at 8 o'clock because I'm not quite all there. And you may say, well, you're not all there at any time. What's this big deal? So, do we have reserved sacrament? Yes, we do. Who is allowed to distribute the reserved sacrament? Those who have a license from Bishop Brewer. And I've been filling out I've been endorsing papers these past few weeks, and the lay Eucharistic visitors have been filling in the applications, and I have to vouch for Bishop Brewer that this is a person of high moral conduct and caliber who can go out and do this stuff. So don't stick up a liquor store on your trip out because I'll get in trouble because I vouched for you. The other person is a lay Eucharistic minister. Those are the people who serve at the altar. But they're different from a lay Eucharistic visitor who goes out with a communion box. Now, what does this word Eucharist mean? Sometimes you hear the services of Holy Communion referred to as the Eucharist, or you'll hear it called the Mass, or the Lord's Supper, whatever. Different customs, different places. It comes from the Greek word meaning thanksgiving and refers to Christian services that recall Christ's sacrifice on the cross, along with his Last Supper with his disciples. In the Eucharist, we offer our lives to God in thanksgiving and worship in response to his ultimate sacrifice and partake of the body and blood of Christ, mystically present in bread and wine. Since the beginning, Christians have been gathering together weekly to offer prayers, hear the word of God in Scripture, and celebrate or take part in the Eucharist. The principal weekly service of communion is celebrated on Sunday, the Lord's Day, because it's the day that Christ rose from the dead. And we've got a little biblical point about that. I'm me, and this may apply to nobody else but me, but when I celebrate Holy Communion, I move into a different mindset worldview. I'm not celebrating Holy Communion with 20, 30, 40, 100 people. If you will, I am celebrating, partaking with the communion of saints. In my heart and in my mind, I am part of this body of Christian believers. I don't view myself as the magic man that when I snap it, when I bless it, or when I touch it, boom, magic happens. I view myself as being one among millions of Christians, past, present, and future, partaking, celebrating, being part of the body of, and following Christ, of the body of Christ, his body of believers, and doing what he commanded them to do. Why do we do what we do at Holy Communion? Because Jesus told us to. Take, eat, this is my body. Drink, this is my blood of the new covenant which I have shed for you. Do this in memory of me. We take the words from the Bible. Episcopalians are Bible Christians. They're screwy Episcopalians, of course, just like they're screwy everybody. But at our heart, ours is a Bible-driven service. You get more Bible in an Episcopal church service than just about anybody else. Because so much of our service is restatement of Bible passages and truths. Now, what happens in the Holy Communion? Well, I don't want to go too deep into this, but if you'd like to look at it, prayer, scripture, and song, then the sermon, then the creeds, I believe, prayers of the people, confession of sin, peace. Then at the communion itself, part 2, in some places called service of the word and service of communion, but it's all the communion service. Then I go through bit by bit what happens at each little stage and why we do what we do and what it means. Now, here's another question. We talk about the body and blood of Jesus Christ mystically being present. We don't define that. Mystically present, spiritually present. Why don't we define that? Because of the wars of religion. The wars between the Protestants and the Catholics in Europe 500 years ago about such things. What happens at Holy Communion? What exactly is happening? English Civil War, some of the same issues. There were political issues, of course. But the Elizabethan settlement, Queen Elizabeth basically said, we're going to be the via media, we're going to do it down the middle. The Roman Catholic Church believes that when the priest celebrates, he's recreating the sacrifice of the Mass and the cross, and that bread and that wine becomes the true body and blood of Jesus Christ. Its outward shape, its outward symbol, outward aspect remains bread and wine, but it is truly, really the body and blood of Jesus Christ. When we had the series on the Holy Grail, just a little aside, one of the things about the Holy Grail is that Joseph of Arimathea, after Christ's death, he took the body into his tomb. It was Joseph of Arimathea's house that the Last Supper was celebrated in, so it was his cutlery and silverware and cups and saucers. So he had the chalice that was used that they shared with blood, and then when he picked up Christ's body, some of Christ's blood, he cupped in the chalice, and that chalice was taken to England, and the whole Knights of the Holy Grail legend. Well, then you ask yourself, well, how come that thing didn't spill? If Jesus' blood was in that for 1,000 years until King Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot and Percival were looking for it, how come nobody knocked it over? Didn't they have cats in the Middle Ages to knock over everything?
Tupperware top.
Well, the answer is every time a priest celebrates Holy Communion, the true blood of Christ is in that cup. It's called the real presence. Then at the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant reformers sort of broke into two groups. The sort of middle way is, if you will, the Lutheran way. Martin Luther, Calvinists and others like that. Martin Luther and the early Episcopal leaders, Anglican leaders, where it is Christ's body and blood, but it is spiritually Christ's body and blood. We're not saying we don't believe in the real presence. We believe this is Christ's body and blood, but spiritually, in our hearts, not in the physical sense. So we treat and we revere and we have the same way of addressing and adopting and looking at this, but we're not going to say that, this matter has changed from bread and wine to human body, human flesh and human blood. And then there is the, if you will, the extreme product, I don't want to say extreme, but the most progressive of that time Protestant views, which is this is purely symbolic. It's just symbolism. When Susan and I were younger, we did internship at, what was that church? Laurie Thompson's church. What was that called? In Trumbull, Connecticut.
I know, I can't remember the name, but Grace.
Grace Episcopal Church in Trumbull, Connecticut. We did 2 years of training there. And Laurie Thompson's wife Mary was a real Connecticut suburban housewife. With a Volvo station wagon and down vests and just was the type, what I mean, I wanted to strangle, but nonetheless. Mary had this love to cook, and she was a terrible cook. So for coffee hour, she would make all these baked goods, and you could take her muffins, and you could take it back to track practice and use it as a shot put. I mean, they were awful. But she liked to make the communion bread.
Oh, no.
And so she had her own recipe for pita type bread. And once she made pita bread with pimentos baked in there. And so Laurie is short for Lawrence. Laurie Thompson, her husband, is celebrating at the altar. I'm standing by reverently like this, on one side. And he breaks the bread and the pimentos drop down. And I said to Laurie under my breath, just like I'll talk to Gail while we're up there, or Kathy, what part of Christ's body are these? This is called the Zwinglian, after Heinrich Zwingli, the Swiss Protestant theologian. If you are someone who believes this is purely memorial, you can use pita bread with pimentos. It doesn't matter. If you're a Roman Catholic or if you're a traditional Anglo-Catholic, this is awful, theologically awful. If you're like me, it's just bad taste, but still. But see, that sort of encompasses, within the Episcopal world, we have that swing. And our the Eucharists say all three. It is Christ's body and blood, physically. Oh, but then the next paragraph says, now it's spiritually. Oh, now it's a memorial. Yes, Kathy?
I just wanted to say, the whole time I was in Honduras, I was the bread maker. because we couldn't afford to buy Host. And so I had a bread that was called St. Joseph's bread. It's used by many monasteries. And so I did that. I was the bread maker.
Yes.
You explained to me why we were not concerned with some guests we had here in church who were not necessarily of the Christian faith, and why we were not concerned that they would try to make off with stuff. Will you talk about that so that everybody else will understand?
2 years ago, we did a funeral for the granddaughter of a member of the congregation. She was the young girl who died in a traffic accident on 19, and she had been drinking with some friends, and they were all in the car holding up alcohol bottles, a crack pipe, and the boy in the back seat had a pistol, you know. They're 19 years old, and they're speeding down the highway, and they're doing selfie videos. And of course, she loses control of the car, and they all get killed. So the funeral, Grandma calls, can we do the funeral? Of course, I'll do the funeral, no questions asked. And I don't worry myself over the circumstances of this or that. Well, most of her friends were what I would call of the biker persuasion.
Dark.
And we had some really different people here. I remember this one woman, she looked like she'd been smoking 5 packs a day for 50 years. You know, that wrinkly smoke, you know, what it does to some people. Black hair piled this high up, I mean, like 5-6 inches above the top of her skull that's going down. Snakes and demonic symbols tattooed everywhere, skull rings, leather pants, a leather vest, and you know, the little Egyptian ankh, you know, the cross with the circle at the top earrings. If she were at this fair doing fortune telling, she'd be perfect. But, you know, this is Shepherd of the Hills on a Thursday morning at 10:15. And were you helping me? Were you, who was
No,
doing-
you were kind enough. It was it?
It was
Jim
Michael.
was here?
It was
Michael
Michael.
Herman Smith, and Michael
And
was the,
and someone else was someone else was torching that ended up leaving.
Brenda and Henry Hunster.
No, I saw it, and that was in
A lot of these people, I mean, they were into Satanism, bikerism, and this and that. And this woman is rooting, you know, we keep the communions before the start of the service at the back, next to where the greeters and ushers sort of sit back there. She's rooting through those, picking out communion wafers for the start of the service. And she says, and I talked to her and I said, well, you know, we really shouldn't touch those. And I basically made noises about being sanitary and quietly saying, what the hell are you doing? Well, she wanted some consecrated hosts for her witchcraft rituals. Now, if I were an Anglo-Catholic, I can take comfort in that, well, they weren't consecrated, so they're just bread and wine. She didn't know where the stuff was. If I'm a Lutheran, then I could say, well, takes all types, but man, we've got to stop her from doing this. If I were Zwinglian, well, it doesn't matter what she does. Because, you know, if she doesn't spiritually believe, it could be, will avail her not. And you can find all three positions in our Book of Common Prayer. There's a portion where it says that those evil people can take communion, but it availeth them not. So, you know, just if you're a Satanist and you take Holy Communion, it doesn't do anything for you. So Michael and I had to sort of sweetly hustle this lady into her chair and not have a scene or anything. But, you know, and we didn't have a discussion on Satanism and stuff, but, well, she was from Assassins. Oh my, I got myself in trouble with this. So the Episcopal world has deliberately chosen ambiguity. St. Anne's is more Anglo-Catholic and traditional than we are. Probably St. Margaret's is probably on the Eucharist about where we are.
Yes, right.
About where we are. I think you probably have to go up to some place in the Northeast to find a true Zwinglian or Big Pine Key to find a hippy-dippy Episcopal church. But we're all part of the same denomination. And at any one service, we're going to have members of the congregation on all three, or somewhere on all three. And part of the Episcopal way is that you don't have to believe one and only one and disbelieve all the others. You know, there's a wideness and a boundary. For some people, that is wrong. And that's why they damn the Episcopal Church. For other people, that is an accommodation that helps them in their journey in life. You know, because they're not already there when they walk in the door. Now, where do you think I am? Does anybody know? Good.
George.
Good, because I teach, because I need to be open and available to all people. St. Paul said, I'm all things to all people. Not that he was mealy-mouthed, but he presents the gospel and the message of Jesus Christ in a way that will greet each person where they are. So, from George's perspective, and this is just George, a good priest is not an angry doctrinaire priest. A good priest is a loving, accepting priest who knows what he believes, but is okay with you catching up. That's silly. Okay, so,
We've been joking about Big Pine,
yes.
and I'll have to phrase it in that once a month, they would bring up this service, and it formed a different outlook for people in communion with the world, because they took a portion from New Zealand, and they entered it into the service, and they took a portion from a little island off of Scotland, I think if I remember correctly, and brought it into the
Iona.
service. So
Yes.
it was this hybrid thing that was like, we are the communion of Christians on the earth. It isn't just here in Wakonga, it's everywhere. And I think that was the important part.
I'm trying very hard not to say something silly because this is profound and important. And what Lila said, I don't know if you heard, it's the universality of who we are as Christians. We're not all, don't all look like us. We're different. And we're all part of a church that it's not up to us to set its human boundaries as to who's in and who's out.
If you accidentally drop the host, how do you do that?
That's the job of lay Eucharistic ministers and the priest. Don't want you trying to reach over and around and underneath. You know, I'm a consumer, so usually pick it up, I put it in my mouth. I'm a boy, I don't care, I'll eat it.
There's a
And
5-second
another
rule.
one, because of the three sort of worldviews. It would be sacrilege, and I usually finish all the wine and all the wafers. We have one of the sinks in the back room there that pours directly into the earth, because you can return the wine to the earth, or you can preserve it for later services. Some low church people are rather careless about that. I, in mindful of the sensitivities of others, resolve that problem by just finishing it so that there's no.
Is that right? And why is then the water poured in, just to make sure you get it all?
Wine and water was traditionally used because when Christ was crucified, blood and water flowed from his body. When the Roman soldier, the Roman legionnaire speared him, the Bible tells us that water and the blood is wine, and we mix that with the water. Just as an aside, in some parts of the Anglican world, wine is not existent. You go to the Congo, the Congo does not have grapes. They don't have the ability to import wine. What do? Or they don't grow grain. They don't grow wheat and grain. What do? Well, in the Congo, they use wafers made out of yams and Coca-Cola. Now, if I used Coca-Cola, people would have heart failure. And I wouldn't.
It would have to be done.
Have the RC Cola with it?
Diet.
Diet Coke. But am I going to say that they are not being faithful? Because in the Congo, in the middle of, abject, total, complete poverty, you're not going to get wine. Kathy,
When I was helping to serve in Honduras, we didn't have enough money for wine either. People would bring little bottles of wine in as a donation. So at Eucharist, I would have to put only a tablespoon or more in the cup of wine, and then I would fill the rest with water because we just did not have enough. The first time I served here actually was in Okeechobee with Father Weiss, and I asked him, I said, how much wine do I use? And he was startled, and he says, well, as much as would serve 100 people. I said, oh, okay, well, I can use 2 tablespoons for that. And then afterwards, we always were very, very careful to clean off the paten to make sure we got all the crumbs from the paten because we were using bread. And then we would make sure that the inside of the chalice was clean. I would finish that off with the water, and then again with water 2 times, and clean it before it was passed out.
if you watch as the deacons clean the altar table after the service, that's what we do here. And one of the things, first the lay Eucharistic ministers hand me the wine to finish. I finish it. Then the cups are given to the deacon, who then cleanses them with water. And usually they take the paten, a little plate that has the crumb, and there'll be some crumbs on it, and they might pour water on that, swirl it around, and dump that into the cup. Then they hand it to me to finish that mixture, and I finish it. So that everything is consumed, there's no loss or whatnot. I don't want to run out of time before I touch on all the pieces of paper I brought to you today, but I just want to touch on 2 things. Colors. I'll wear this green. The altar hangings will be green. The late Eucharistic ministers' those rope cords will be green. This is green, and we use this during certain seasons of the year. This is Trinity Tide, or the period after Pentecost during the summer. We use green most of all. We use green in the spring. We use purple for Lent. You could also use purple for Advent, but we use purple for Lent. Shepherd of the Hills, we use blue for Advent. We could also use blue for, we could also use purple, but we use blue. And on feast days of the Virgin Mary, we use blue. On Saints' days, Pentecosts, and other Sundays like that, baptisms, I think, we use ordinations, we use red. White, we use for Easter and Christmas and other things so marked.
And funerals.
Funerals. Black, I use for certain types of funerals. You can use white or black. I prefer white. I happen to have a black one. For people who are from a Catholic background, they're happier with the black than the white. I'm indifferent.
And pet interment.
And pet interments, yes. This is not a stole. This is called a tippet, or a scarf. This is what you wear for morning and evening prayer, or services where you don't have Holy Communion. Or if you're an old-fashioned Episcopalian of the type pre-1960, you wore this for everything. Because it was only this Catholic innovation of using colors. So if you look at pictures of the Episcopal Church in the early part of the century, in the 19th century, it's just this. They don't have colors. This is something we have adopted from the Catholic Church over the past 100 years. When you wear a tippet, you also wear one of these, which is an academic hood, like you get at college graduations. So if I were doing a morning prayer or the blessings of the pets or something, this would be the outfit. And if you look at pictures of priests in the 40s, this is what they wore all the time. Now, why do I wear this? This is called a surplice and a cassock. And why do Kathy and Gail and Mike and Linda wear a white owl, cassock owl? Cassock owls were created in the 1960s to combine the surplice and the cassock into one garment. The prayer book says you need to wear a surplice. Everything else is sort of optional. And so the surplice now also includes the cassock owl. So the basic garment is either a cassock and surplice or a cassock owl. I am traditional minded. I don't like cassock owls. I have one, I only wear it when the cassocks are dirty. And the cassocks come in two types. This is an Anglican one, where it's buttoned on the shoulder, it's double-breasted. Then there's a Catholic one, which is buttoned down the front. I have both of these. I also have a third one where the buttons are red and there's piping on the shoulder. That canons, which are priests who have been given an honorary title, it's the England Episcopal equivalent of a Monsignor. I'm a canon. Catholic Church, I'd be a Monsignor. Or Monsignore in Italian. I've been one of those since 1998. It's an honorific title. I can never lose that unless I get deposed or defrauded. So in the diocese, the canons of the diocese, the bishop's assistant is made a canon during the tenure of his appointment. Senior clergy are made honorary canons for their entire ministry. When you're a dean, you also have the right to wear a black cassock and you can have purple buttons. I was a dean for 6 years, 4 years? I was a dean for a long time. 4 years, 3 years? 3 years. I didn't want to buy a new cassock that, I couldn't wear in good conscience after I retired. Bishops wear purple cassocks. The purple comes in two colors, bright purple and sort of a royal blue. And usually the bishop's wife picks what goes best with her husband's or wife's complexion. The bishop wears a surplice, but his are gathered here. He doesn't have these long droopy sleeves. And over that he wears a black or a red garment that leaves the sleeves open. That's the bishop's choir dress. Now a modern innovation, I can't stand it, but I won't say anything because Bishop Brewer does it. He wears that outfit with a colored stole. He might as well be wearing brown shoes instead of black shoes. Come on now. When you wear that, you're supposed to wear this. If the bishop is going to celebrate wearing one of these, all he's supposed to wear is his surplice. But hey, nobody asked me. Not my decision.
There's no uniform manual.
There's no uniform. Some churches, and we have what are called chasubles. They look like ponchos. They come in various styles. The modern chasuble looks like a poncho, and they come in the same colors. The traditional ones are called fiddleback, where they're sort of cut to the body size. George, you never wear chasubles, and we have all these beautiful chasubles. Why? Because I sweat profusely. And they were bought when Father Ladd was here, meaning they're bought for a man who's 5'6", who weighs 140 pounds. So I can't get my head through some of them. And others I would ruin within a service. Do I have to wear a chasuble? No, I don't. Yes, Pat?
Are you going to touch at all on why we don't involve the Virgin Mary in our belief that the Catholic Church does?
I will, but that one I'm going to give a little more time to.
Right. Next week.
Back for that. So I just wanted to touch on colors, and the last thing I wanted to touch on, did everybody get one of these? Anybody not have one they want? Well, I'll pass one to this one. The Episcopal Church is called, Episcopal is an adjective. You'll read, if you Google the word Episcopal, you'll read Catholic Episcopal Conferences or the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Then you read about the Episcopal Church. Do we have the copyright in the word Episcopal? No, we don't, because it means of bishops. We're Anglicans, we're also Episcopalians, we also belong to an Episcopal church. So the word Episcopal is not necessarily a Protestant word. It's a Catholic word, it's just an adjectival term. It means a church ordered or organized or governed by bishops. Now in the later classes we'll talk about how that government works, because we don't have a pope, we don't have king, priests, or bishops, and this, that, that's a different day. But what we have is apostolic succession. This is something I picked up years ago when I was a student. This is the apostolic succession of the Bishop of Dallas at the time, Donis Patterson. He came to my seminary and he taught a little class, visiting class, and Donis Patterson can trace his orders back to, I think it's St. Peter, and who was the other one? St. James, or? James the Less and St. Peter, meaning over the course of the centuries, St. Peter laid his hands on somebody. Who laid their hands on somebody? It's like the VO5 commercial. I told two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. But there's an unbroken line of apostolic succession for each Episcopal priest. Now, during the Reformation, the Catholic bishops of England, when they broke with the Pope, none of them, I can think of, maybe one or two maybe, got angry. They just kept being bishops, and they ordained new bishops. They did it without the permission of the Pope, but they still had the authority to do that. So the Catholic Church has long said Episcopal priests may be licit, but they're not lawful. What does that mean? They consider me a priest, but I cannot act like a priest because I'm not under the authority of the Pope. Episcopalians in the Church of England are the only group of priests. I can become a Roman Catholic priest. I got to take a course or two. But I can become a Roman Catholic priest and still be married to my wife Susan and be a married Catholic priest. I just have to have my orders regularized, meaning I have to swear allegiance and authority to the Pope and the magisterium of the Catholic Church. Catholic priests can become Episcopal priests without being reordained, because they were in Orthodox. Those who were consecrated were made priests by a bishop with apostolic succession can move in and out of the Episcopal and Catholic churches if they basically swear allegiance to the new team. If you're a Lutheran or a Presbyterian or a Baptist minister, you have to go through the whole service again, because they're not made ministers by bishops, they're made by other people. Dick?
When do you think the Catholic Church, priest getting married?
Well,
Do
we
you
need to
see
answer
it?
that. What is Dick talking about?
Do you,
Something called the Synod of the Amazon is taking place right now in Rome. And Pope Francis has made it known that he is favoring the things that they're discussing. What are they discussing? Women deacons, for start. There are women training in schools in South America alongside men to be permanent deacons. So that Kathy Pennybacker and Gail Towle could have their Roman Catholic female counterparts within the next 2 or 3 years. They're just waiting for the Pope to say so. They're also talking about allowing married priests. And right now, there are 2 types of married Catholic priests. What are called Eastern Rite, meaning the Ukrainian Catholics and the Ruthenian Catholics, who were once Orthodox, but 400 or 500 years ago came under the Pope, but were allowed their own ways. And their ways include being married priests, but not married bishops. And Episcopalians, who in the last 25 years became Catholics. There are about 500 former Church of England priests who became Roman Catholic priests. There are about the same number in the Episcopal Church. There are probably 3 or 4 times as many former Catholic priests who are Episcopal priests now, but you know, there's that back and forth. What Dick's talking about now is allowing regular Roman Rite Catholic laymen who are married, and deacons may be married, those deacons to be ordained into priests,
Yeah.
changing the rule of celibacy. And that is being debated right now, and there's a strong faction in support of it. What do I think about it? Well, I'm in favor of it on one level, but for the way I don't think it's going to happen, because how much it costs. Catholic priest in the United States, a diocesan priest makes $25,000 a year salary stipend. Now, their housing's provided, all this and that is provided, but they usually live in a rectory with 3 or 4 other priests, and they have a housekeeper. A married priest has a wife, has children, has pension. You know how much it costs to employ me. If we were to hire somebody straight out of seminary, with all the costs, that's $100,000. That's his minimum wage Episcopal priest, with all the stuff that is added on top to provide for everything. Catholic Church is having money problems right now, and if all of a sudden the cost went from $25,000 a priest to $100,000 a priest minimum, how could they do that? And how can you raise a family on $25,000 a year? So on the practical purposes, I just don't see it happening. But I can.
They're running out of this.
They're running out of priests, and they may just consecrate older men who've already had their families, or maybe whose wives are willing to work. But on a practical level, and it also says something really, I don't want to say this in an unkind way, but for those priests who have struggled and given their lives totally and have made the sacrifice of not ever marrying, to say, oh, well, that was okay, I mean, that was good for you, but we're not going to change the rules. That, I think, must be intensely heartbreaking. Yes.
Another thing that's a problem with the Catholic priest being married at this point is if for any reason, which happens a lot in this world today, the marriage is dissolved because they divorced for some reason, who supports the children and the wife? The church would have to, if he doesn't have the income, because like he said, there's a separateness of where they live and how they're supported. And so where does the income to maintain the household for the wife and the children come from? It comes from the church, and they don't pay for it.
And
Are you worried at the time, Father? It's
You were, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
one final, the last piece of paper, and we'll get to this next week, the weeks to come. A short guide to the duties of church membership. It's written 75 years ago, but it still is a true statement. Just look at it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.